The number of households living in emergency housing has dropped by a third in just 6 months. Auckland saw the biggest drop from 624 to 354 households. At its worst, we had 4,000 kids living in motels and emergency accommodation across the country. Associate Minister for Housing, Tama Potaka, says more than 1,000 children have been rehoused in homes by kāinga ora or community organisations since the government came to power. And he joins me now. Kia ora, Tama.
Kia ora, Leah. Hey, how are you?
Kate Spy, good to talk to you. Hey, this is great news. Although it's quite astonishing, these numbers of families, children, whānau, being rehoused in such a short space of time. But kudos to the government. But where's the majority gone to live?
Well, first of all, Leah, thanks for having me on this great show. Appreciate your time. The focus of this government is to stop the fiscal, moral and social catastrophe that is emergency housing. And you and I and hundreds of thousands of other Kiwis don't like seeing whānau, especially tamariki, living in these emergency hotel conditions. So when we arrived, there were about 3,140 whānau living in emergency housing. Now there's about 2,130. That's at June 30. And we'll give you an update on the July or August numbers when they come through. So it's dropped 1,000 families, and importantly, over 1,000 tamariki have now been rehoused. 50% go to transitional and social housing. That's the data we have. About 30% go to private housing.
Okay.
Like just mums and dad landlords. And there's 20% we don't know because people aren't under an obligation to tell us where they go. But that's the intel that we have, and we know for sure. About 50% some sort of public supported housing, and about 30%, just under 30% private housing.
Okay, so, I mean, this was achieved in 6 months. Potaka, one question, though, I think that made me scratch my head. We've seen families in hotels for months and months and months on end under the previous government. Some have stayed a year. What were they doing?
Oh, a couple of years.
Couple of years?
Couple of years. Some have been in there for longer than a couple of years. So,
were they just put in there and forgotten?
Well, what I'd say is that I think we're taking responsibility, and we're saying we can't let this continue. When we arrived, it was $1 million a day. Now it's $500,000 a day. I call that blue shoots, Leah. Blue shoots, not green, blue. And we don't know, it might bounce up again. But we're really focused on making sure that we just tighten the gateway so we make it really clear about who's eligible to get into emergency housing. It's not just random, it's people with genuine needs, because that's why emergency housing was set up way back when under Paula Bennett and others. Those people with a genuine need for a short-term stay and temporary accommodation. But it turned into something massively different. I think you said 4,000. At the peak, there were over 5,000 families and households that were in this type of situation. And not only is that expensive for the state, it's actually, reducing the potential of these whānau and their tamariki to live empowered lives. And that's who we want it to be. We did focus on tamariki when we arrived, though, Leah. So April, we started something called Priority 1. So whānau with children that had been there longer than 12 weeks, they got put to the top of the social housing register. By the end of June, April to the end of June, 340 families. At the end of July, 540 families with kids have been placed somewhere.
Jeez. Can we move then into the starting of at the end of this month? Is at the end of this month you want you will also introduce something that will make it clearer the obligations for emergency housing assistance, and that includes completing agreed activities. Can you tell us what some of them are?
Well, we want to make sure that when people come into emergency housing, that they've actually gone through a process of trying to look for housing, that they've taken steps to either find a house that's suitable for them, perhaps move them on whānau if it works, rather than just standing up and asking for essentially the taxpayer to support their stay for 7 days or sometimes up to a lot longer, an emergency. So making sure that people take responsibility, especially when taxpayer funds are involved, Leah. There is a responsibility incumbent on those people that are using taxpayer funds to do what they can, within reason, to find a house. The other thing is that we want to support those whānau that are living in emergency housing by having programs and other things to ensure that they are ready or getting ready to actually go back into either private housing or social housing. And there's a bit of a contribution you have to make as well when you're in emergency housing. If you get job seeker or other types of benefits, there is a contribution back to the government.
Okay.
So those are the sorts of things that we expect from people that are moving into emergency. You go through that eligibility and make sure that you're picking up your part of the bargain too.